What is happening in Syria? I wanted to make a video to clear up what's going on in Syria since the situation is very confusing and a lot of people are not understanding what the case is and what is not the case in Syria. But to start, we have to get some context. In the beginning of December of last year, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who has been president for various decades, was ousted by an incursion from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham militant group, backed by other rebel groups. It started the campaign in late November, and by the beginning of December, due to various reasons, but mostly the betrayal of the Assad government by its soldiers, the rebels had reached Damascus and had captured the whole of Syria, just starting from their enclave in the northwestern town of Idlib. So after that, what happened? This new regime of some people call them terrorists, some call them rebels, depending on their political agenda. And in fact, we could say that there are different factions, and some of them are terrorists or have terrorist elements in them, and some are just dissidents of the Assad regime. These groups are not united, but they were united or at least unified in their attempt to oust Bashar al-Assad, or in their successful attempt, I'd rather say, to oust Bashar al-Assad in late 2024, after many years of Syria's civil war, which saw a lot of foreign involvement as well, where they ultimately were not able to beat the government forces. After some years of almost standstill, they were finally successful. What's so important to notice and to note is that Syria is a very multi-ethnic country, and there are various people with various beliefs. Obviously, the majority of people are Sunni Muslims. Around 85% of the population is either Sunni, 75%, and another 10% are Alawites, which is an offshoot of Shia Muslims. And there are also Christian people and Druze. So there's a long-standing rivalry between the various groups, especially between Sunni Muslims and the Alawites who live in the northwest of the country. There's a lot of sectarianism. The Shia Muslims, they are a minority, not just in Syria, but globally among the Muslim community. They are present mostly in Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and in part in Yemen. So this is basically the constellation of countries that coincides with the axis of resistance, well, with the exception of Palestine. But for the most part, those are the axis of resistant countries, which are the closest allies of Hamas and the Palestinian cause. Sunni Muslims are the ones who are leading the rebel groups, and therefore, for the last 7 to 8 months, they have been having the upper hand, which is a complete 180-degree change compared to before, because Assad, who was the president, was himself an Alawite Shia Muslim, and he was also a Ba'athist, which means that he was part of this movement, which is of socialist inspiration. It's a movement that aims to create a pan-Arabic state, which includes all Arab countries, without resorting to state religion, Islam as the state religion. So it rejects basically that kind of thing. Similarly to what Saddam Hussein's stance was. He was also a Ba'athist when he was in power in Iraq. This is obviously not the case for the new government led by Ahmed al-Sharaa, who is better known by his nom de guerre, which is Mohammed al-Jalani. He was an ex-al-Nusra militant, which was a terrorist group that was active and was in combat during the Syrian war in the 2010s. So basically now, after him coming to power in this new constellation of Syria, he's been accused of being whitewashed by the Western media, the Western governments who have accepted him as the new head of state without mentioning his not so glorious past. In fact, the most hilarious thing is that since 2017, he has had a bounty on his head of up to $10 million by the United States government. This was declared during the first Trump administration, and now, right after Trump came back, he was accepted by Trump and by his administration again. So that's an interesting coincidence. But yeah, this thing is obviously a big deal, and it's something that shouldn't be ignored or taken lightly. But just as Trump imposed a bounty on al-Sharaa in 2017, this year, he lifted sanctions and restrictions against this guy. And yeah, the reason is presumably that he wanted to maintain, and he declared that he wanted to maintain or create diplomatic relations from scratch with Israel, and that he wanted no war with Israel and with the Jewish state, therefore. But the most important thing of all is that with this new Syrian government, the land bridge between Hezbollah and Iran, which are the most important components of the axis of resistance in the Levant, or let's say between the Levant and Persia, they would be cut off from each other. So Iran could not supply Hezbollah as it has done before with Assad, who was on their side. So obviously this gives Israel an even more favorable position than it already was, weakening their opponents. And yeah, so a lot of it has to be said that a lot of Syrians have cheered this revolution, this change in government, which was long expected by many Syrians. It is difficult to say how many, or if it is a majority, if it is a majority and now they have changed their mind. It is hard to say. I don't want to get into that. But anyways, what is sure that is that after just a few months, in the beginning of 2025, there were numerous reprisal campaigns, and there was also an uprising by the Alawites in the northwestern part of the country, in Latakia, in Tartus, where also the Russian military bases are located. And yeah, the Russians had partially withdrawn, but their bases were still there, and there were some Russians still there. Some of their equipment is still to be found there. So basically, yeah, what happened? The new government forces started to go into these cities, these armed gangs, and they started massacring many Shia Muslims and Alawites just because they were of another belief. So therefore, a lot of Shia inhabitants, a lot of Alawites started to seek refuge into the Russian Tartus airbase in order to find a safe haven from these armed thugs who were storming houses looking for people to kill. Figures suggest that at least 800 people in total were killed. Some of them are armed. It was not just one-way slaughter. Also, the Alawites killed Sunnis, but for the most part, it was the Sunnis killing Alawites, and many of these were summary executions of unarmed people. So we can surely call this a mass-scale killing and a massacre, which happened in many different towns in the area of Syria, and it wasn't just an isolated phenomenon. After that, the situation calmed down for a while, and the power was gained back by the government. But later on, in the end of April, there were another few fights, but this time with the Druze in the south of the country. Yeah, there were also some unprompted episodes of violence against the Druze, but these were limited to killings on the scale of 10 to 20 people. What has happened now in the beginning of July is that the Druze have started an uprising just as in the northwest of Syria a couple of months before. This time, though, the difference is that they have the backing of Israel, because Israel has also opposed themselves to this new government. Even though the government has declared, as I just mentioned before, that they didn't want any war with Israel, that they were for normalization with Israel, Israelis have sent soldiers, they have sent military equipment into the southeastern part to support these Druze people who are being slaughtered by the Syrians. At least this is the ideal pretext for Netanyahu to actually start occupying another part of Syria. There are not only Druze there are also Syrian Bedouins who mostly support the government who live in that area, so there are clashes between these two factions. as well as other Sunni Muslims who are joining the Bedouins in the fight against the Druze. But the most unexpected thing that has happened and the most significant event that has unfolded in the last few days was when on the 16th of July, the Israeli Air Force started bombing the capital of Syria, Damascus. So along with the bombing of the Druze areas in the south, the city of As-Suwaida, and the targets of the rebels or the ex-rebels, they have started bombing the entrance of the Ministry of Defense of Syria, which marks a very important escalation. They also bombed the presidential palace in the center of Damascus on Al Umayyad Square. And basically, this is a very important development. Also, it is worth mentioning that right after the Assad regime was overthrown, Israel began a bombing campaign right in December to destroy all remaining Syrian army assets, which were significant. There were a lot of fighter jets, huge weapon stockpile, and so forth, and military vehicles and tanks, and so forth. In total, the Israelis made more than 480 airstrikes in just 2 days in order to disable these stockpiles, these weapons, this military capability, and to prevent them from falling in the hands of the new government. They say that up to 80% of the military equipment was demolished by Israel. Basically, Israel wanted to cut the head of the new Syrian snake. So, all in all, this is a very ambiguous situation, as you can tell from all the connections that are present. Because on the one hand, we have America and Israel, which are supposed great, or actual, in reality, mostly great allies. But they seem to have a disagreement in the specific situations. America has removed sanctions, and it has invited Syria to join the Abraham Accords in order to improve trade relations with Middle Eastern countries and with Israel, most importantly, and to normalize its ties with Israel. But on the other hand, Israel doesn't really seem to agree to this, and they seem to want to make this new regime succumb, even though they're much more moderate than Assad was in relation to Israel. But this seems exactly the reason why Israel is acting now. Because since Assad is gone and the organized army that existed under him is gone, there's basically no deterrence left. They could destroy everything. The armed forces are disorganized. They are more comparable to armed gangs than actually an organized armed force. The Syrian army that had active air defenses, Russian air defense system, was non-existent within this new transitional government. So this is a preventative action by Israel. Now, the difference, though, is that they do not even have an army to defend themselves and make Syria an independent state in the real meaning of the word. So coming back to the United States, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has been wanting to impose a ceasefire, which has also been declared by Ahmed al-Sharaa just a few days ago, but clashes have been ongoing, continuing in Al-Suwaida, the most important Jewish city. So it is unknown what will happen now. Many fighters have been deployed to the south of Syria from both sides. The Syrian government isn't exactly giving up, although the Israeli threat is obviously very real and is much more powerful than them.